Welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast.
Hey Brij, welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. How are we doing?
Good, thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. So Brij, before we even get involved, I guess usually the first question I ask my guests is kind of what's your tagline? Can you remember the one which you gave me?
I can. It didn't actually take me too long, surprisingly. It was just a guy with too many tattoos and not enough corporate common sense.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm sure we will get into that.
You responded to that. It could have been you as well. So there might be a bit of a pattern going on.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah, it definitely is. So, I mean, before we even get into this, how many tattoos have you got?
I've got 5.
Okay.
But my arms are fairly well covered, like the inside of my arms. So if I'm walking down the street with my arms at my sides, you might not be able to see any. But then if you're sitting in front of me and I'm wearing like a short sleeve top or something, you can see 4 out of 5 of them. And then I've got one on my shoulder as well. Getting another one in October as well.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah.
So what?
And then just the teardrops under the eyes after that.
Have you got a couple of spider webs on your elbows and stuff as well?
No, but I am getting Live, Laugh, Love somewhere. I've just got to find the most obvious place in my body to get it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that one. So, which one is your favourite tattoo?
Ooh, my favourite tattoo. So I've got one. I've got one on my upper right arm, which is it's like a sketch. So it doesn't look like most tattoos you see in that it's not just kind of block or realistic or realism, photorealism. It looks much more like an artist sketch, and it's of a woman who looks a little bit sad, a little bit pensive. She's got her eyes closed and she's just got her head tilted down slightly. And it's just kind of her upper body. It kind of cuts off around her waist, which is also where it meets my elbow.
Okay. So what made you get that tattoo?
So I think this was after a handful of probably failed relationships. I sort of thought to myself, what am I doing wrong? What is it I do in my love life that ends up turning a handful of these relationships that I've had sour?
Okay.
So I sort of have an answer. I think I'm probably just a really difficult person, but I got it as a reminder to me to be more considerate and more balanced in my relationships in the future, and not just kind of romantic relationships, and talk about all relationships, I suppose, to try and bring a little bit more balance to that.
Okay, decent. I like that. I like it. So I asked you a question. Usually I tend to only ask like 2 questions, and first one is what's the log line, and then the second one is kind of, when you was in school, and the teacher would say to you kind of what do you want to be when you grow up? What was the answer you'd give him, Brij?
So I'm not sure how long I wanted to do this, but I do vividly remember that the first thing that I remember wanting to do was be an engineer. And I don't know why I wanted to do that, except I think I wanted to design a car. I wanted to build a car, which is weird because I'm not into cars. I'm not one of those guys that's all about this is an Audi, whatever it is, and all that kind of stuff. But for some reason, I was really interested in kind of how it all fitted together and how it all worked.
Okay.
And then I got a bit older and I kind of sucked at maths and physics, which it turns out are like the 2 main things you need for it. But nonetheless, it was definitely the first thing I remember really wanting to do.
Okay. So okay. I mean, let's just jump straight in. So everything you think you know about, well, I guess everything what we talk about on here is going to kind of, it dips in between, your personal and professional life, and any questions which I'm going to ask you, kind of, take it as a personal, or you can go professional with it. I really don't mind.
Okay.
But I guess for kind of the people who don't know who you are, maybe you could give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of who you are and where you've come from to where you are right now.
Yeah, okay. So I guess, I'll skip over the kind of early life stuff or summarize it
Okay.
in that, academia, school, all of that stuff. I wasn't really kind of a super academic, high performing kid, and I never was. Primary school, secondary school, A levels. For a period of time, I very much thought about not going to university or not even doing A levels actually. And I kind of had these pretty average grades. Just kind of went to university, probably had too much fun, didn't do enough work, but scraped 2-1. Then I found myself being an adult, which was something that was just really uncomfortable for me because I didn't know how to do that. And I think a lot of people kind of feel like that when they leave university or first start paying the bills and all of that kind of stuff. So I ended up doing a graduate scheme at Network Rail in IT. And it wasn't like a very technical IT job, but I really just took it because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And although certainly the first year or so there, I was, doing different projects and things like that I didn't really enjoy. I think it kind of showed me, here is a set of stuff that you don't want to do, so don't do that anymore. And because it was a grad scheme and all that kind of stuff, I had the opportunity to kind of move around, go to other parts of the business. Ended up doing more kind of transformation work, which I actually did enjoy. But partway through that grad scheme, I had a death in my family, so my dad passed away. And I was living in Milton Keynes at the time, because that's where this job was based, and my family home is in London. And for lots of different reasons, I needed to be closer to them after that happened. So I started looking for jobs in London. And a lot of the people I was working with were former consultants previously, like they'd worked in management consultancy jobs and all that kind of stuff. So I really kind of respected them, and I thought, there's a lot of these kinds of jobs in London. It will give me a chance to travel. The money's pretty good. It sounds like, a really good thing to try and get into. So, I spent a little while looking and interviewing and all of that kind of stuff. I ended up with, I think it was three offers, and I took one of them, the one that paid the most, at PA Consulting. Okay. And then I spent 4 years there, and I did lots of different things there. So Danny, you and I know each other more or less through Nick and some of the people that used to work with Nick at BP. And when I first got to PA, Nick wasn't there, Charlie Neen wasn't there, Gemma Critchley wasn't there, all of these people. And I was doing more kind of program management, project management stuff, which was all right. And actually, my first couple of years there, I think I learned more than I had in a very, very long time, over a much longer period of time. I got a huge amount out of it. The kind of the level of challenge, the kind of hands-off support, the sorts of things that are expected of you in an environment like that are just really tough. And it got me really competent really quickly. And it started to take me away from this person where I used to be, where I was a bit of a waster, didn't really care about school, just kind of wanted to have fun, into someone who was quite driven and cared about the kind of work that I was doing and took a lot more pride in it. And then along came Nick Shackleton-Jones and his band into PA. It's like Cool in the Gang, isn't it? Nick Shackleton-Jones and the band. They joined PA. I'd been there for maybe a year and a half at that point, and I just moved out of that kind of projects and programs world into more of the kind of HR consulting space, which was the bit that Nick joined as well, Nick and the team. And I ended up working on some projects with them and ended up being part of that team, and spent a few years there, kind of working on a few different projects. Some pretty big names, good names actually. Kind of like we did a little bit of work with Facebook, very very small, just kind of going and speaking to their L&D teams. But bigger pieces of work with like the UN over in New York, Johnson and Johnson as well in New Jersey. Lots of really interesting, cool work in digital learning. And then I started to get the itch. I started to feel like maybe consultancy wasn't for me. Maybe I wanted to be on the other side of the table, making decisions or directing the work we do from a more kind of strategic perspective rather than just doing the doing. So over about maybe a year, I spent some time looking at other jobs out there. Eventually, actually, for our mutual acquaintance, Charlie Neen, heard about the current gig that I'm at with Legal & General. So I went in and spoke to them, found out a bit about the business, found out a bit about the role, handed in my notice at PA, and got absolutely wasted at the Christmas party, which was also my last day. And I mean royally wasted. So you've never seen anything like it, Danny.
Okay.
I know. And that was it. That took me to January this year, and I've been at Legal & General for just over 4 months now.
Okay, so I guess kind of how's that transition been from kind of going, from kind of a more, I'm going to say this wrong, but take it out in the positive way, but from kind of the doing role to the more strategic thinking role, how have you found that transition?
Bloody difficult. I actually found it really hard, and I didn't know I was finding it hard for a little while, and I underestimated how hard it is. Because you come out of an environment in the consultancy where you're doing so much more day to day than you thought you'd be able to do, that you leave and you think nothing could be more difficult than that. And actually, it's not a case of what's easier and harder and all of that kind of stuff. It's actually a case of one role is very different to another role. And unless you actually recognize that and say to yourself, I'm not a consultant anymore, I'm doing something else, I can't rely on all the stuff that made me a good consultant, I have to be good in this job in its own right, you're bound to kind of run into some struggles. And I think the main thing that I walked away after the first few months of it from was I treated it like a race in the way that you kind of treat your consulting projects, because they're, you have a certain amount of money, you have to do it in a certain time, you have to deliver deliverables. Whereas actually, I should have spent more time getting to know people, understanding the business I was working in, and I shouldn't have been in such a rush to kind of say this is what I know will work, and I just want to get on with it and do it. So the transition, if I'm honest, was the hardest transition I've had in any job. And it's still happening, still ongoing. I'm still moving into it, I think. But I'm grateful now, at least, that it's kind of been pointed out to me that I might be struggling with it. And that's the first step for me, is knowing that it's not the easiest transition and doing things differently.
I guess it's kind of hard to even practice that before being in that situation. I mean, when I think about it, like, when we talk about you actually learn by doing, I guess it's hard for you to kind of mimic that transition before actually going in and actually just doing it, and especially in a new business where you don't know how that business works. So
yeah, definitely. I think because I'd worked in industry before I went to PA, but it's just a completely different level. I left the last company I was in before PA at a reasonably junior level. At best, you would probably categorize it as like lower management.
Okay.
And then after leaving PA, I've gone into a head of role. So just the difference in where I sit in the organisation is quite vast. I'm not by any means kind of super senior or anything like that. I wouldn't pretend to be, but it is when compared to my previous experience in industry, a difference. And I had no experience of that. beforehand. It's a huge challenge. But I look at it in a positive way, because what was bugging me about PA was that the work stopped feeling difficult. I stopped feeling like I was being challenged, and I started to feel too comfortable. And actually, I feel uncomfortable every day now. I feel like I'm being challenged every day, and I feel like I'm getting more out of it every day than I was my last days at PA. And everyone's experience is different. There'll be people that have stayed in jobs like the one I had at PA for a much longer period of time and had great experiences and continued to learn. But just for me, it wasn't right. And it's just now moving into this new position, this new job, new way of working, that I'm just experiencing something completely different.
I think that's good. It's a good thing. For me, I think reasons why I get on is because you're pretty authentic, Brij. You kind of say how it is, and you're not shy of saying, actually, I'm struggling here, or kind of, I didn't see that, and actually that kind of blindsided me a little bit. But it's kind of you learning, I guess. But I guess if you had to give advice to someone who's in your position now and is debating whether to stay within their consultancy world, let's say, or debating to go back into kind of a corporate world, and listening to kind of, your journey, what advice would you give them?
I mean, I'd say do the thing that makes you feel more alive, the thing that scares you a little bit. And I think for most people that's change. Staying where you are is easy. It's moving into the unknown that's more difficult. But if someone had already got to the point where they've made that decision, they're going to move and try something different, I'd probably tell them, slow down there, buckaroo, take your time, and don't worry about, making a huge impact and, buying into the idea that you need all these quick wins straight away. I think it's underestimated how difficult it can be to move jobs. It's kind of always, there's a honeymoon period, obviously, but it's kind of seen as a more positive experience, where actually for a lot of people it can be quite difficult. And I would say to anyone who's looking at moving jobs or thinking about moving jobs, to take their time with it. Don't hesitate because it's something you're scared about. That's not at all what I mean. I think they should definitely take the leap if it's something that excites them. But once they've taken that step, they don't need to break into a sprint. You can take your time and kind of gradually ease into that role, because 9 times out of 10 that's going to give you a much better result.
Okay. I think that's sound advice, definitely. So, obviously going from kind of this kind of consultancy role and going back into kind of, the role that you're in now, and I guess in the roles in between, all the roles before, what's the one bit of bad advice someone's give you?
What's a bit of bad advice someone's given me about?
Yeah. And maybe it's not necessarily professional, maybe it's kind of personal, I don't know. But maybe what's the one bit of advice what either someone's give you or you've overheard someone give to someone else?
That's a good question. I need to think about it just for a minute.
Yeah, no, it's cool, I guess.
Oh, actually, no, I've got one. I've got a bad piece of advice that I was given, actually.
Okay.
So this was in, obviously it wasn't in the company I'm in now, but I just won't name companies for this, given it's a slightly negative story.
Okay, sure thing.
It was about a year in to when I first joined there, and I was going for my first promotion. So I went for my first promotion after about a year, and when I was talking it through with my line manager about what I could do to secure that promotion, his advice to me was, your work's good, but it doesn't really matter. The main things that you have to do now are shave your beard, wear a tie, I think, and be in the office more. Which was A horrendous piece of advice. But it depends how you look at it, because I think I was just like, yeah, whatever. I want the promotion, and to have more booze money for the weekend. So, whatever. I'll wear a tie. I'll be in the office. So I did it, and I got the promotion. But actually, it's really, really terrible advice to give. Maybe it was useful advice to receive, but it sucks as a way of doing things and a way of making decisions in companies, that, we're going to give someone a promotion because intuitively they feel more professional and more capable, simply because they don't have facial hair and they're wearing a cravat, and they happen to be sitting near me 4 or 5 days a week. It's just daft.
Okay, so Brij, I'm going to make an assumption here, but I'm going to say you sound like the type of person who's maybe been in trouble a little bit over time. And when I say in trouble, I don't mean like with the police or anything like that. But I guess looking at where you are now and kind of, while you was in school, can you remember the first time you ever got in trouble? And actually, what was that for? I mean, this can go right back to being a kid or anything like that. What's the first memory, what comes to mind of you being in trouble?
I'm going a bit blank on the primary school stuff. I must have got in trouble somewhere for something, but I don't remember what.
And it's a strange question to ask.
My last, this has just come to mind. It might not be the first, but my very last week of secondary school. So I was like in sixth form, penultimate week or the last week, one of the two. I think it was the last week actually. I punched a kid in the face, and he had to go get stitches, and there was blood and stuff like that, and I got suspended. And this must have been like a Monday or something, and my last day was a Friday, and I was suspended for the rest of that week, and then they let me back for the very last day so that I could finish up with the rest of my year. And for the life of me, I can't remember why I did that. There was a reason. It wasn't just kind of completely unprovoked or random. I didn't make it all the way to year 13 just randomly punching people in the face down the halls. There was a reason, but it was a long time ago, and I don't remember now. But yeah, that struck me as something that I got in trouble for at a young age.
Okay, fair enough. So let's flip it on its head then. So you being the adult now what you are, if I was to ask you to give, if you was to give a gift to a child, what gift would you give?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think I would veer away from giving them a present, because we sometimes sort of think kids are quite easy to please, but actually, the things that will kind of delight one child will be quite different to another. And I'm very, very close and active in my niece's life, who's 10 years old now, nearly 11. And the last, I bought her a few things since, but the last major thing I bought her was a rug. And a rug is not something you'd think to buy a 10-year-old child, but she came to my flat, saw my rug, really loved it, and wanted a rug. So I got that for her. But I think that the main kind of gift to give to a child is probably to play with them. So in general, I think the way that we kind of raise kids is, or increasingly so, is that it's a balance between money and time. And I think we should be spending half as much money and twice as much time with them. And most children like to kind of enjoy themselves and have fun, and whether it's playing video games or building Lego or whatnot, just taking part in something that they enjoy, I think, would be the main gift, the gift of my time. Look at that. That sounds zen.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So all right, and so take away the fact of spending some quality time with your niece and stuff. When was the last time you played like a child? Like, when was the last time you kind of played like our child does?
When was the last time I played like a child? So, I mean, so I spent a week in Boston. I took my niece, incidentally, to visit some family there, and that was only a few weeks ago. And the family I was visiting have two kids, so you can imagine it's chaos, and there's lots of kind of play going around all the time. So actually, most days there, I was doing stuff like picking them up and throwing them in the air and catching them again, or playing with toy cars and all that kind of stuff. So actually, I kind of do it quite regularly, but I feel like maybe the question you're asking is, when have I done it for myself?
Yep.
I mean, look, I occasionally throw the PlayStation on. I mean, I may be officially an adult, but I'm still a boy sometimes. So, I whack on the Call of Duty, shoot some peeps, pap some fools.
Good man.
But yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything else I've done recently that's really playful. The thing that's springing to mind for me is I went to that ball pit, Borley Ballerson in Shoreditch, but actually that was like a year and a half ago. And when I say it out loud like that, it feels like such a long time has passed since I last did something that was just ridiculous.
And I find this interesting, and maybe it's just, let's just put it into a learning context. A lot of people say, "Oh, we need to play more. We need to play more." I'm like, okay, when was the last time you did that? When was the last time you kind of? I mean, play is kind of, for me anyway, I see play as kind of just using your imagination. This might not necessarily be kind of play football or whatever. Sometimes it's just kind of that giving yourself an experience. Your ball pit, for example, what you mentioned.
Yeah.
Recently I went on one zombie things. I mean, I wouldn't class it as play. It's probably one of the most intense experiences of my life. But it was kind of just taking me away from kind of adult life, so to speak. But yeah, it's an interesting one. And, one of my close friends, he plays with Lego all the time. And he's like, what, 20, 30? Yeah, about 30-ish. And he loves Lego even now as an adult.
Yeah, I mean, but I kind of think that's great, because for me, play, if you put it in a work context or you don't put it in a work context, it kind of doesn't matter. For me, it's kind of about going where your energy is. Mm-hmm. So, for some people that might be using your imagination, doing something quite creative. For other people, it might be, just getting a tattoo or bungee jumping or playing PlayStation or whatever it is, actually. But whatever excites you and kind of brings out some of the characteristics that you associate with children, like kind of glee and delight and being carefree. I think those are the things that really constitute play. It's not what you physically do, it's how you feel doing it.
Okay, so just to play devil's advocate, maybe this is on a past project or on a project you're working on right now, but when was the last time you incorporated play into a work project? And maybe you could probably even flip the question to say, actually, what was the most enjoyable work project you've been on?
Yeah, so I think the most enjoyable work project I've been on is working with Johnson and Johnson, which I think I mentioned earlier. It's out in New Jersey, and the thing that I really enjoyed about it was hard work. Actually, it was the not just the quantity of the work that we had to do in the time that we had, but also the kind of intellectual challenge. But the thing that I really liked about working there, a few things. One of them was the people, clients, because this was at PA as a consultant. Clients could kind of make or break your experience of a project. And I can honestly say I've never worked with a group of people who I had a better time working with than my clients at Johnson & Johnson. They're amazing. But the other thing that really, really stood out to me was they wanted you to do stuff the way that we talked about, doing work versus strategic work. They obviously, it was kind of a given. They wanted you to be able to produce stuff and do stuff at the end of the day. But the other thing that they really wanted was they wanted to be challenged, and they wanted to be out there, and they really wanted to innovate. And for me, that was incredibly enjoyable, because it was sort of an actual partnership where we're saying, look, this is what we're trying to achieve, and we're not set on how we do it. let's just, promise each other we're going to get there and we're going to do it in a way which we're going to be talking about on podcasts for years to come. And there were lots of little elements of that project rather than, big things, I think, that stand out as kind of playful. But so an example is Nick Shackleton-Jones and I were running a workshop in New Jersey with a lot of the team there, the Johnson & Johnson team, and we'd only spoken to them on the phone or on Skype or whatever up until this point. We were meeting them for the first time there. So naturally you kind of think, it might be a little bit awkward at first. We're still kind of getting to know each other. But actually, and for some reason, I don't know why we did this, we didn't plan this, but Nick and I basically spent the workshop slyly digging each other out and making and cracking jokes at each other's expense throughout the entire day. So for example, we were having lunch and they'd put on this kind of spread of food, this buffet, and I kind of picked something up, put it on my plate, and I was saying that my girlfriend at the time had been on at me about losing some weight, but eating a bit healthier or whatever. And Nick, standing directly opposite me, he's looking down at his plate while I'm saying this, and without pausing even for a second or looking up to make eye contact with me, he just goes, "Yeah, she has a point," and then walks off. And the best part about it was, over Nick's shoulder was our main client, who was sitting there typing on his laptop, and I could see that he, when Nick said that, he just froze for a second. Just for a moment. He didn't look up or do anything. He just kind of froze for a second, as if, what the hell did I just hear? And it was interesting because Nick and I joked about it afterwards, about how those people were buying leadership work from us. And here's this guy who, certainly in their eyes was, my leader. And, he's making jokes about my weight. And, I don't even think I'm that husky. So, but it's little things like that where we didn't take ourselves too seriously because we felt like we didn't have to in that environment and with those people, and we were all actually passionate about doing what we were there to do. I worked very long hours because they're based out across the pond, so time zones have an impact on when you work. I was working crazy hours, but I never felt bad about that. I never felt as if I were wasting time or that I was regretful about it, because I genuinely cared about what I was doing there.
I think it's interesting, kind of, you kind of said something there which I find really interesting, not to take ourselves too seriously. And I think, when you look at kind of just maybe put it into a corporate environment for now, and I have been bad for this as well in the past. Kind of, you get put into this corporate environment, or you get put into an environment where you're like, I feel like I've got to be somebody else. Like I can't, what? For me, like I always have this thing of, how I speak to you will be how I speak to you. I won't use posh words. I will just be normal. Like how you see me in my professional context will be how you see me in my personal. And I know, Brij, you struggle with my accent sometimes. But I guess I find it really interesting that even now there's still this thing of work is work and kind of personal life is personal life, and the two can't really blend over too much. I mean, don't get me wrong, you see some companies which do this really, really well. But it's an interesting thing that you kind of mentioned, not to take yourself too seriously. And I think a lot of companies are starting to kind of like that more and more, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, it takes some time to kind of permeate through. I mean, we talk about authenticity a lot, and if you ask different people, they'll have different definitions of it. And I do think that professionalism in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. I just don't think that professionalism and being yourself are kind of mutually exclusive. I think you can not take yourself too seriously and at the same time be professional. I feel like it shouldn't be taboo to say to someone, I disagree. I'm not sure. I don't think that will work out the way that we're talking about it working out. But actually, you know, you're encouraged either really overtly or quite subtly to express that opinion in different ways and not be straightforward with it, to make sure that people don't feel like you're being too abrasive, or that people don't feel like you're not listening to them and whatnot. Whereas actually, I think that goes a step beyond being professional. That's what I would define as kind of corporate, in the sense that we're not really being open and transparent and straightforward, where we're kind of, to some extent, sussing out the politics and the way that things work in an unspoken way and navigating around those. And that entire system of working in that way is self-sustaining. It exists because we allow it to exist, and everyone does it because everyone's scared of falling foul of it. But I actually think that the biggest threat to our well-being at work, our mental health, I think the biggest threat to our creativity at work is corporate culture. It's not, the fact that we work a certain number of hours or a certain number of days. It's that, the norm, the social norm is that that presenteeism is important, or that, you don't turn up late and leave early or something like that. Whereas actually we talk a big game about, being flexible with our work and working at different times and all of this kind of stuff. When in reality, we can't help but fall back on some of those norms, some of those things that take us a step beyond just being professional and into corporate. And actually, to give credit where credit's due, I've been pleasantly surprised by how my current employer handles flexibility. Not something necessarily that was a huge factor for me in taking that job, but I can see the impact it has on other people there, and they've done that pretty well. But even there, like everywhere, there's still room for improvement and room to grow.
Yeah, I think it's a weird one, because someone asked me recently, in fact it was literally yesterday, someone asked me yesterday, it was like, they put a picture in and they said, what do you think to this? And in this work, this environment, they had "don't be a dick" on the wall. I'm like, that's great as an idea, but a lot of the times there's two things what I think is fundamentally flawed. One, businesses make assumptions that their values, everyone has to live by them, where fundamentally that's flawed, because not everybody has the same values, and it's an actual daft idea to assume that this is our values and our behaviours. And then, putting something up like "don't be a dick," that's great, but what happens after 3 days when it just becomes background? Like, we put these values and behaviours up on a wall, and we laminate them, and we put them on a nice big board so everybody can see them. But after 2 days, it's kind of like, it's just a board. The message is gone, it's not important. And realistically, the values probably don't really mean anything anyway. And then add on this fact of, we put, there's a massive industry on how to give feedback and stuff like this. And, I was reading a book recently called Radical Candor. And I just sat back and I thought, we just put so many filters on what we want to say. By the time we've applied the 7th filter or 8th filter on what we want to say, the meaning of it is completely gone. And actually it's got so twisted and tightened up that it's never really delivered in the way it's meant to be delivered anyway. And it becomes watered down, weak, and kind of, it doesn't have, by the end, it doesn't have the intention what it was meant to have at the beginning.
No, I agree. It's easier to kind of misinterpret what people say when they've kind of layered it up like that as well. But it's that's almost what I mean by the fact that kind of corporate culture is quite self-sustaining, because as soon as someone says something in a way which isn't kind of diluted by 6, 7, or 8 layers, it stands out more, and it might feel more confrontational. I my own experience, I think outside of any criticism I have about kind of corporate culture, I probably do need to do more myself to come across as less abrasive or less confrontational. But I think that where I would say I've worked on that and I've now reached a level which is acceptable would probably still fall short of the kind of accepted norms that you find in most companies. And I mean I'd also agree with you around to some extent around values and behaviours. I think the idea that everyone shares all of your values as an organisation is, it's pushing it a little bit, in the sense that, how many values do we all have? As a company, we kind of mentioned 3 or 4. Do we think that people only have 3 or 4? Is it kind of an infinite number that they can have? Do we just kind of post-rationalise that either ourselves or someone that we're interviewing shares those values? But ultimately, I don't even think it matters too much if you personally identify with a word that a company puts on their website. Some values can be different, but they'll still be aligned. They won't be mutually exclusive. So, you might see a value of, bravery or courage, and someone might not necessarily feel like courage is something that they hold dear, but they might really strongly be motivated by the idea of doing the right thing. And just because we don't necessarily see evidence of courage in someone's actions, do we not think that someone who does the right thing is equally important? Do we not think that that's still in the same kind of vague area? It's still in the right direction. So, I mean, different people have different views on these kind of values and behaviours, conversations. For me, I think they start to become a little bit of an existential crisis, a little bit of navel gazing, where we're kind of talking about stuff which matters, but I think there's other stuff that matters more. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's one value what I've seen, and I don't really think it's a value. It's just kind of something what we live by. IDEO, they have a value. I think it's a value anyway, or a statement, and one of theirs is we promote others. And I thought that's actually quite a cool thing to have. Rather than saying we do the right thing, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of some of the other values what I've seen in the past. But I just think actually one of them is that, we promote others is a great thing to have. But again, I use this analogy of a couple of months ago, well, probably about a year ago actually. It's mad when you lose track of time. But I was driving past a school, and outside this school they had, the speed barriers, what they put up in school, so if a car crashes it hits some really strong kind of concrete post. Yeah. And what we did is they painted one of the concrete posts to look like a child. And the idea is that, if you're driving up to it, what you see now is not a concrete post, you see something what resembles slightly as a child. Yeah. But fundamentally, the problem is with that is once you drive past it once or twice and you realise that that's not a child and it's a post, actually, if anything, it loses its value, and it actually it's a backward step. Because when there is a child there, your brain will automatically go, oh, it's that post. And I think a lot of the values are exactly like that. They're the post, they're the thing what we put up, and we probably send out a comms email to say, hey, here's our new values, and here's how it's kind of aligns to every single touch point and whatever. But then, like you say, life moves on and other things become more important.
Yeah, I guess, the sorts of people whose job it is to define our values and behaviours and kind of spread them out into companies, I don't think it's the easiest job, actually, because you'd have lots of different data points, lots of information, lots of different opinions, and it's a bit of an exercise probably to try and sum that up in a way and bring it up a level.
Yeah.
Language which people can still kind of align behind. You introduce a lot of subjectivity, I think, into the conversation, because by by having a single word summarize maybe 10, 15, 20 different people's opinions, perspectives, and experiences and views of what the future organization needs in terms of values, by design, you can't be very, very clear with them. They have to be left open for some interpretation. And if they're left open for interpretation, how confident are we that everyone is really living them?
No, it's a good question. It's a good challenge. I mean, I've done some work in the past with trying to do this, and at the time I felt it was a bit of a flawed kind of problem to fix, because it's just one of them things, And I guess your values change over time, and some people obviously say no, they don't, but I think they kind of do. Once you have more life experience, and you have more engagement with the world and the people around you, your values do, I think, over time change. And it's weird to kind of say these values are kind of fixed in stone and they're not adaptable. It's a strange one.
Yeah, and actually, I think something. So again, I'm mentioning Nick Beckerton Jones, who I remember quite early on when I first met him. He got a bunch of us in a room together, and he had maybe 100 or so different cards on the table. Each of them had a different word on it, and some of those words you would probably think of as your more typical company values. Things like, honesty and inclusion and transparency and so on. But there were also some other really interesting words on there, like family and love and autonomy and equality, but I don't think he used the word equality. I think he used something else. Fame, glory, lots of different things, and asked all of us to pick out, I think it was 5 that appealed to us as individuals, and then to tell a story about one of them. And he did that, and I think continues to do that to this day, because it helped him understand more about what makes that person tick and what it is that really motivates or that person cares about. And the stories that, we all told, the majority of them anyway, had nothing to do with work. They were about our families or our friends or major formative experiences in our lives and what they meant to us. And, at the time I thought it was neat, and, actually, I walked away from it feeling really kind of positive. But it was only until much later when I really came to understand what he talks about with effective context and the idea of all learning is driven by our emotion, that I understood that what he was trying to do there was understand what our mountains are in our emotions. What are the really big things we care about? Because that's the way that he's going to, connect us to the bigger picture. He's going to build on the things that we care about, talk about things in the way that will resonate with us. And I'm sure his starting point had nothing to do with the company's values and whatnot. He took a huge list and even said, write your own if you want to write your own. And actually, it really just stuck with me. I really remember it, and I hope to kind of do something similar myself. Actually,
yeah, it sounds pretty cool. I remember again with Nick. I can't remember what it was. It might have been at a learning tech event or something. We had a chat. I think we met up for a brew or something, and we got talking about kind of treating people, right. And I think one of the guys said, "Oh yeah, I just want people to treat me like." Treat people like I want to be treated, and he kind of corrects him straight away. He went, "No, you just need to treat people how they want to be treated, not treat me like you want to be treated." And it's just a little tweak, and you kind of look at the statement completely different. But yeah, no, it's good like that, I guess. I guess what I'm thinking about now is just being mindful of your time, Brij, because it's like 56 minutes in already. So I'm going to give you some fire round questions.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Cool. Okay, social media. Is social media a net positive or a net negative to society?
Net positive.
Okay, why?
I think that although it has huge cons and huge downfalls, it is allowing us to remain more connected and more, if we choose to embrace it, more aware of what's going on in the wider world. I think a lot of that is kind of contingent on some of the larger social media companies being responsible with the way that we are provided with personalized content. But overall, I think it is shining a light on areas which perhaps would have remained hidden for a lot longer 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
Okay. So, Brij, do you support football? What team do you support, sorry?
I'm not really a football fan, to be honest with you.
Okay. Let's just use, I don't know, basketball, whatever. You come out of the stadium, yeah? And, you know, life has been good to you. You're a millionaire and you went out free. No, you went out one big billboard, okay? And on that billboard, you can put a statement up there, maybe some words, whatever, and millions of people are going to see this billboard. What do you put up on there?
Oh, that's a good question. What would I put up there? Maybe something like, "Someone please buy Danny a new hoodie because his one is terrible."
How dare you?
No, I think, what would I put up there? What the hell would I put up there? Okay. See, there's a part of me that just wants to do something silly, like put a meme up there. And then there's a part of me that wants to say something profound.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe a profound meme, like a Nicolas Cage meme would be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, what would I actually put up there? I think I would put up there, you know, wake up, challenge everything, ask questions, don't be afraid.
Okay, I like that. So, okay, here's another deep one. And, you know, I guess, in fact, let's do a quick one. What's the 3 biggest problems you're facing in your professional role right now? And when I say biggest problems, I mean not you personally, but like, what's your 3 biggest challenges in your role right now as a business, maybe, if you like?
So I can maybe describe them as in from a kind of learning and development perspective. What are the biggest things?
Yep.
So I think one of them is the kind of experience we're giving people when they first join the company. So, you know, our mandatory learning, I think that experience needs to be improved, and also we need to do more to help new joiners kind of settle in. So I think that early stage of the employee life cycle and how we support them, a lot of which isn't necessarily learning in the truest sense, is something I'm definitely thinking a lot about. I think that another area is how we encourage people in the company to make the most of the opportunities that they have available to them. So, you know, not just to think of learning as something that happens when you go into a classroom and there's someone standing up in front of you talking, and that actually it's about, you know, your own experiences, the challenges you face, and what you can do every single day to push yourself. So that's definitely another one. And then a third one would probably be just creating a great digital experience for our employees. So, you know, I've got a small part of that in terms of building a digital learning platform, but actually it's a drop in the ocean, I guess, compared to the kind of experience we get in our personal lives outside of work, where everything can be done through your mobile at your fingertips, to the kind of world that most of us work in kind of corporate organizations. That something that's certainly on my mind is how we don't just make these kind of small incremental improvements and try and catch up with the experience we have outside of work, but how we fully and properly get ahead of it if we can, but at the very least, match it.
Okay. So, if I was to say to you, right, Brij, you have to give a gift of a book to 5 people, what book would you give?
Ooh, okay. Oh, that's a good one. Well, I mean, Nick's book's out now, isn't it? So I'm sure he'll thank me if I'm like, yeah, How People Learn. You can find it on Amazon, but I'm not going to do that because I've done enough free promo for him. What book would I give? So any 5 people, I don't get to know how old they are or anything like that. This is just anyone, right?
Correct.
Anyone, okay. I would give them. So I read a book recently. There's always a risk that I just talk about things that I've read recently because they're things that stick in my mind. But there's 2, and I'm just going to talk through them both, and then I'll decide which one.
Okay.
So, I mean, I read them, like, one of them about 18 months ago, one of them probably 2 years ago. And the first one is Norwegian Wood by Murakami, who's a Japanese author. And it's a story that I won't do justice to by trying to describe, but it was just a book unlike anything I've ever read. So it's fiction. I'm not a big non-fiction reader, but it is fiction, and it just kind of showed me a different way of thinking. That, as in the main character, the protagonist in that book, just seems to think and feel and live his life in a way which is completely different to anyone I've come across. But because his life is not extraordinary, they're not events which are kind of, fantasy and dragons and Game of Thrones style stuff. It's kind of real day to day. It's so much. It stands out as something remarkably different for me. I don't know if I'm doing it justice. I feel like it's one of those things that you have to kind of read for yourself and see if it resonates with you. I can imagine some people would just hate it. And then the other book I think would be Freedom by Jonathan Franzen, American author. It's quite a long book, and it's all about the middle class in America, and it follows in deep detail a family, an American family, and how their lives change over a period of time. And it was just an incredible kind of character study of those people. And I think, under the surface of it, describes and hints at a lot of what's lacking in Western culture and the Western world, a lot of what we've lost and failed to reconnect with, and to some extent also a lot of the hypocrisy that we probably deal with day to day. Again, possibly not that well described, but they're 2 books for me which make me feel rather than think. I didn't come away from it thinking about it lots and lots, because I don't think that stays with you so much. Kind of examining the plot and looking for different things and focusing very much on what happened in the book. I didn't walk away with that kind of experience at all. I walked away with much more of an experience of feeling slightly different, slightly changed, having read both of those things. So those would be the books. If I had to kind of pick one, I'd probably go with Freedom by Jonathan Franzen, just because it's a little bit less Marmitey, I think, than Norwegian Wood.
Okay. I will put links in them books in the show notes as well. So good news is, Brij, we've got one more deep question and then 2 light questions, and then we are done. Okay. So are you ready for a deep one?
Yeah, shoot.
Do you even like yourself?
Do I even like myself? Ooh, that's deep. Do I even like myself? Yeah, I think there are aspects of myself I like, and there are aspects of myself that I don't. Definitely. I I'm quite critical of myself and quite hard on myself. But ultimately, when I'm in a decent kind of frame of mind and stepped away from the kind of the relentlessness of day-to-day work or whatever it may be, I kind of look at my life and go, yeah, I've done all right. I've done better than I thought I would, and overall, I'm happy. I don't know if anyone really truly likes themselves. I don't think you can spend as much time with anyone as you do with yourself and not start to find certain things irritating. And definitely the older I get, the more moments I have where I'm like, it's like watching a car crash where something happens and I know full well my mind is telling me don't react in this way, but I just can't help it. And then, afterwards I'll be like, oh, Brij, why did you do that? You knew you shouldn't do that. You promised yourself you wouldn't do that. Why can't you commit to doing these things in a different way? So there are definitely moments where I'm like, fuck that guy. But then there are lots of moments where I'm like, yeah, it could be a lot worse. I could be Danny Seals.
Oh God, these burns! You're cutting deep today, Rich. So
yeah, I had you on tender hooks right up until the last minute, and then I dropped that. Planned it the whole way through.
Boom. So okay, some easy questions. One, who's the three people who are the three people you recommend people should be following?
Following. Okay. I guess we're talking learning here, yeah?
Yeah. Let's use it. Yeah.
By and large, yeah. Okay. So I think that. So I think a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people say Nick. So I'm not going to say Nick because probably a significant part of your listenership already follow him. And by saying I'm not going to follow him, I've kind of mentioned him anyway.
Yep.
More free promo for him. I would probably say that So I think Charlie Neen has his best years ahead of him in the learning world. I know he's done some cool and interesting stuff already. And he's doing some different stuff now over at Performance Consultants in International, but I sort of feel like there's a bit of a hunger in him to do something quite radically different. And I think it would be interesting to kind of watch how that progresses. Okay. I don't know what that will be yet. I don't think he knows what that will be yet, but you get a sense from people of what they're heading towards, and I think that he'd be an interesting person to watch. I think that another person, so probably Brian Greer, who was the client at Johnson & Johnson I mentioned earlier. So this guy is over in the US, and actually the L&D community, certainly in the UK, doesn't seem to stretch across that far to the US. People will have some contacts, but there's probably in some kind of parallel American universe right now, the American Danny Seal, the American Brij Palicha, but it'll be the other way around. You'd be the southerner and I'd be the northerner over there. Having a conversation about people who work in learning in the US, and none of us would probably be coming up in those conversations either. So I mentioned him because I think that he's got a real passion and interest in pushing the boundaries in learning and doing things that people haven't done before and experimenting. He's particularly interested in things like leadership, but I think he's got a really healthy attitude and way of working and mindset that you don't often see in learning. He's not afraid to kind of do things slightly differently, without a shadow of a doubt. And then number 3, who's a third person? Who is a third person? It's tough. I would maybe say you, Danny, if you weren't actually hosting the podcast, because everyone will have heard of you then. And not because you say anything of substance, quite the opposite actually.
Yeah.
But because you talk about things that other people aren't talking about. And I think that's worth paying attention to.
Okay.
So you are, I mean, you can't help obviously but talk about some of the things that everyone in learning talks about, but you take a different perspective on them, and you talk about those things very differently, and then you talk about different things as well. So you're a lot more focused on, I haven't heard someone talk about service design in the learning space in ages. Like it's just been forever. I don't even know if I've ever heard it. I've heard people talk about it. I'm not even sure if it was in a learning context. But the fact that you talk about those things stands out to me to some extent.
Nice one. I'll take
it. As I said, no substance, but
Yeah, I mean,
baby steps, you'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's just lift and shift from Google anyway.
It is. Yeah. I was going to pretend it's that, but yeah, it's fine. It's just Google with a northern accent.
This is it. So I guess last question then, Brij.
All right.
So at the start, I asked you what your log line was, and you talked about kind of tattoos and kind of corporate kind of, your take on that.
Yeah.
What 4 pieces of advice would you give to you, knowing what you know now, to stop that being an issue?
Stop getting tattoos would be one, but I don't think that's going to happen. What 4 bits of advice would I give myself? I think the first would be never stop trying to find your tribe. So, if you feel slightly out of place in a corporate context, if I felt that way, I would always encourage myself. The piece of advice I would give myself is, don't close yourself off to other things and resign yourself to the environment that you're working in. Definitely stick with it, learn from it, contribute, do good work, but keep looking outside of it as well. It's not just your 9 to 5 where you have to feel like you're amongst all of your like-minded people. It can be that you have a more balanced life and you look for inspiration in different ways. I think another would be, don't be too hard on yourself, even when you're not feeling like you're in the right environment, or when I say right environment, I guess what I mean is I'm prone to the occasional faux pas in the corporate sense. And what I guess I'm hinting at and saying is I should not treat those things as failure. I shouldn't be hard on myself for making a mistake. I should be looking at that mistake and going, well, how can I learn from it? But also, how can I find other situations that bring me up where those ones bring me down? So those 2 things, definitely. I think a third would be don't stop saying stuff which is a little bit controversial. Just be mindful of the way that you say it. So I think, we do still need fresh ideas and different thinking. And, I need to continue to kind of contribute ideas, but I also need, and I know I need to work on this. I need to make sure that I am approachable enough for people to share ideas with me that perhaps they think I wouldn't be open to. Because it isn't all about, what can other people do to accommodate me. Kind of back to the point that you were making about what Nick said, it's about treating people how they want to be treated. I would probably encourage myself but I'm giving myself advice to make sure that I am creating an environment where people feel like they can come and be open and honest with me, because I want an environment where I can be open and honest with them. So I should definitely be doing the same thing back. And yeah, and that last one was don't stop saying the controversial things. Just focus on the way that you say them.
Okay, perfect. Well, Brij, 1 hour 16. I think we can call that a wrap. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. I know I'll be seeing you shortly anyway. But yeah, where can people find a little bit more about you and kind of what you're up to?
I mean, I occasionally post cynical things on LinkedIn, and I don't really use Twitter. Instagram is probably the best representation of my life. It's basically dogs and food. Two things I care about. But if people want to follow me from a work perspective, then I would probably go with LinkedIn. Just don't try and sell me stuff through LinkedIn, because I more or less never reply.
Okay, sound advice. Well, Brij, that's it. We are done. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me.
Cheers, Brij. I'll catch you later.
All right, thanks.
Bye.